The first scream echoed across Blackstone Pass, just as the wagon wheel shattered against a jagged stone. The heavy wagon lurched dangerously toward the cliff. The frightened mule lost its footing, and a young pregnant widow threw all her strength against the wooden frame to stop it from plunging into the canyon below. Dust filled the mountain air as hidden riders silently watched from the rocky cliffs above, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Then another wagon appeared through the towering pine trees. Its driver did not reach for his rifle or turn away from danger. Instead, he pulled hard on the reins and headed straight toward the helpless stranger, unaware that this single decision would become the beginning of a story the frontier would remember for generations. If you enjoy unforgettable Wild West adventures, powerful romances, fearless cowboys, and stories where kindness changes lives, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Nordic Love Stories. Every bit of support helps keep these timeless frontier legends alive. The cowboy's name was Caleb Hart, a 38-year-old mountain freighter who spent most of his life crossing dangerous trails between isolated ranches, hidden deep inside the northern Rockies. His broad shoulders, weathered face, and calm blue eyes reflected years of surviving storms, harsh winters, and lonely roads where only the strongest travelers dared to ride. People respected Caleb because he never boasted about bravery. He simply did what was right, no matter the cost. The woman struggling beside the broken wagon was Eleanor Brooks, only 25 years old and carrying her first child. Her husband had died from a deadly fever 8 months earlier, leaving her alone with nothing except a land deed promising a small valley farm beyond the mountains. Selling nearly everything she owned, Eleanor had begun the long journey, hoping to build a peaceful future for her unborn child. Unfortunately, the mountains showed little mercy. Her food supplies were nearly gone, one mule could barely walk, and now the broken wagon threatened to destroy the final hope she had left. Caleb climbed down without saying a word. He carefully studied the broken wheel before noticing something far more dangerous. Fresh horse tracks crossed the hillside above them. Small rocks continued sliding from the cliffs, although there was no wind. Even the birds had suddenly fallen silent. Years of surviving mountain trails had taught him one lesson. When nature became this quiet, trouble was already close. He quickly tied Eleanor's exhausted mule behind his own team, lifted every crate into his larger freight wagon, strengthened the damaged axle using spare timber, and helped the frightened widow climb safely beside him. Eleanor tried to thank him, but Caleb gently shook his head. "Save your strength," he said quietly. "These mountains aren't finished testing us yet." As the wagons continued, through the narrow pass, hidden figures watched from above with growing frustration. Their leader, Gideon Crow, lowered his spyglass and frowned beneath the brim of his black hat. He had expected an easy robbery, but the arrival of Caleb Hart complicated everything. Crow knew the mountain cowboy by reputation. Caleb had survived blizzards, wild horse stampedes, and more than one outlaw ambush. Taking him down would require patience instead of speed. Crow raised his hand, silently ordering his gang to continue following from the cliffs without revealing themselves. Neither Caleb nor Eleanor noticed the distant movement among the rocks, but Ranger, Caleb's powerful bay horse, repeatedly lifted his ears and snorted nervously toward the ridgeline. Caleb trusted the horse's instincts as much as his own. Without alarming Eleanor, he loosened the leather strap securing his Winchester rifle beside the wagon seat, and quietly scanned every bend ahead. The afternoon sun slowly disappeared behind dark clouds gathering above the peaks, casting long shadows across Blackstone Pass. The trail ahead narrowed between towering cliffs where escape would become almost impossible. Caleb understood they had only one chance to reach the next settlement before darkness, but deep inside he carried a feeling he could not ignore. Someone was hunting them, and the real fight had not even begun. The narrow canyon swallowed the last rays of sunlight. As Caleb urged the horses forward without looking back, Ranger suddenly stopped, pawed the ground, and let out a sharp, warning neigh. In the same heartbeat, a rifle shot exploded. From the cliffs, the bullet tore through the canvas covering the freight wagon, missing Eleanor by only inches. The terrified horses surged ahead, while echoes of gunfire rolled across the mountains. "Hold on!" Caleb shouted, snapping the reins as more bullets shattered rocks around them. Dust and splintered wood filled the air, while 6 masked riders burst from behind towering boulders, racing down the slope with ropes and rifles. Their leader, Gideon Crow, believed the frightened widow would surrender within moments, but he had underestimated the calm determination of the mountain cowboy. Caleb steered the wagon toward an abandoned logging trail that only experienced freighters remembered. The path was rough, narrow, and dangerous, yet it offered one advantage: the outlaws could not surround them. Eleanor wrapped both arms around her unborn child, while fighting to remain steady as the wagon bounced over exposed roots and loose stones. Behind them, Crow's gang continued the chase, their horses struggling across the uneven ground. Caleb spotted an old pine tree leaning over the trail, its roots barely holding to the rocky hillside. He raised his Winchester, waited until the wagon cleared the danger, then fired one carefully aimed shot. The weakened tree crashed across the narrow path with a deafening roar, forcing several outlaws to pull back, while 2 horses stumbled into the fallen branches. It was only a temporary escape, but it created the precious minutes they desperately needed. As evening settled over the mountains, Caleb and Eleanor finally reached the quiet settlement of Cedar Hollow. Small cabins surrounded a wooden church, smoke drifted from stone chimneys, and tired ranchers returned from the fields before nightfall. Yet despite the peaceful appearance, fear lingered in every face. Doors closed quickly after strangers arrived, and armed men stood guard near the entrance of the town. Sheriff Nathan Cole welcomed Caleb with a firm handshake before his expression turned serious after hearing about the ambush. He revealed that Gideon Crow and his gang had robbed ranches, burned supply, wagons, and frightened families across the territory for months. Several deputies had already lost their lives trying to capture them. Eleanor planned to continue her journey after one night's rest, but the town doctor examined her and warned that the difficult trip had placed dangerous strain on both mother and child. Traveling again so soon could cost them everything. She needed several weeks of rest before facing another mountain trail. Although Caleb had intended to leave with the sunrise, he quietly rented a small riverside cabin for Eleanor, using nearly all the money he had earned from his latest supply run. When she offered him the few silver coins she still carried, he smiled gently and pushed her hand back. "Keep them," he said. "Your little one will need them more than I ever will." Over the following days, Eleanor slowly recovered. She helped the women of Cedar Hollow mend clothes, bake bread, and teach young children their letters. Her kindness quickly earned the respect of the townspeople. Caleb spent his days repairing fences, hauling lumber, and helping Sheriff Cole strengthen the town's defenses. Every evening, they shared simple meals outside Eleanor's cabin, speaking about hope instead of sorrow. For the first time since losing their loved ones and peaceful lives, both discovered that loneliness became lighter when shared with someone who understood pain without asking questions. Neither realized that far beyond the hills, Gideon Crow had already gathered more desperate outlaws than ever before. Standing beside a blazing campfire, he unfolded a rough map of Cedar Hollow and smiled coldly. "At sunrise," he told his men, "the town, the horses, and everything they own will belong to us. And this time, Caleb Hart won't escape." The church bell rang wildly just as the first rays of sunrise touched the mountains. A frightened ranch boy came racing into Cedar Hollow on horseback, shouting that dozens of armed riders were approaching through the eastern valley. Within seconds, the peaceful town burst into action. Mothers hurried children into the church cellar, while ranchers grabbed rifles from above their fireplaces. Blacksmiths abandoned their forges to reinforce wagon barricades across the main street. Sheriff Nathan Cole calmly organized every volunteer. But everyone knew the coming battle would decide whether Cedar Hollow survived another day. Caleb stood beside Ranger, quietly checking every round in his Winchester before looking toward Eleanor. She rested one hand over her unborn child and offered him a small, determined smile. "Come back alive," she whispered. Caleb simply nodded because some promises were too important for words. Minutes later, Gideon Crow and nearly 30 outlaws thundered into the valley, raising clouds of dust behind galloping horses. They expected frightened settlers to surrender immediately, but instead they found a united town, standing shoulder to shoulder. The first exchange of gunfire echoed across the mountains as defenders fired from behind sturdy wagon walls. Crow's riders charged through the smoke, only to discover the narrow streets had become carefully planned traps. Rolling barrels blocked escape routes, while hidden marksmen forced the outlaws to abandon their horses. Chaos spread through the settlement as frightened animals raced between buildings and broken wagon. Wheels scattered across the muddy road. Crow spotted Eleanor standing safely beside the church, with several courageous women carrying supplies to the defenders. Believing she would become the perfect hostage, he spurred his horse toward her. Caleb saw the movement instantly and galloped across the town square, cutting Crow off before he reached the church steps. The two men collided in a violent struggle that carried them through dust, shattered fences, and overturned wagons. Crow fought with anger and greed, but Caleb fought for innocent lives. During the struggle, Crow secretly reached for a hidden revolver beneath his coat. Before he could pull the trigger, Sheriff Cole fired a single precise shot that knocked the weapon from his hand. Deputies rushed forward, surrounding the outlaw leader, while the remaining gang members surrendered one after another. As silence finally returned to Cedar Hollow, the townspeople realized they had defeated fear by standing together instead of hiding from it. Weeks passed and peace slowly returned to the valley. The burned fences were rebuilt, frightened families returned to their homes, and laughter once again filled the streets. One beautiful autumn morning, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The entire town celebrated outside the little wooden church, where neighbors who had once lived as strangers now gathered like one family. Eleanor named her daughter Hope because every step of her journey had been carried by hope and the unexpected kindness of one mountain cowboy. The land her late husband had dreamed of claiming proved rich with fertile soil and clear spring water. Caleb helped build a warm log house, sturdy barns, and long wooden fences, surrounding the growing ranch. Season after season, the lonely property transformed into one of the most welcoming places in the territory. Travelers crossing the mountains always found fresh water, a hot meal, and an open gate waiting for them. As the years passed, Caleb and Eleanor discovered that love sometimes arrives quietly, built not through grand speeches, but through trust, sacrifice, and countless small acts of kindness. They married beneath the same mountains that had once threatened to take everything from them, surrounded by friends who had become family. Long after the old wagon trails disappeared beneath fresh grass, people still paused near Blackstone Pass to tell the story of the mountain cowboy who chose compassion over safety and changed countless lives with a single decision. If this unforgettable Wild West adventure touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Nordic Love Stories. Every story reminds us that courage may win battles, but kindness creates the legacies that live forever.